So you've just bought your first benchtop lathe, or maybe you're just about to, and you just can't wait to get started making custom metal parts for all of your other projects. What you really need right now is something cool to make, to try it out and get a feel for the machine. Well, I've got just what you're looking for, a metal scriber. Not only is it a great weekend project, but when you're finished, you'll have a useful tool that you'll keep for life. I use mine virtually every time I step into my shop. To make this tool, you'll need these materials: a length of brass rod, a steel sewing needle, and some metal adhesive. The needle is a common sewing needle, approximately 1mm in diameter. The brass rod can be any diameter between 3/8 and 1/4 inch. Approximately 5 inches long will feel about right when you're using it. And for metal bonding, I use this type of metal adhesive a lot and find it works great. But if you can't get any, I think cyanoacrylate would be just fine. First up, let's reduce the length of the needle. It needs to be about 3/4 of an inch long. If you have access to a grinder or a belt sander, then this step is dead easy. If you don't have a grinder, here's an alternative. Hold the needle in a vise and using a tri-cut file, make a little nick in the side. You can then simply snap off the excess with a set of pliers. Just don't be tempted to use your cutters. The hardened steel of the needle may chip the blade. Next up, we're going to face the length of brass rod. Load it into your 3-jaw chuck and then pull the chuck through a few turns by hand to confirm the rod is being held properly. Now before we start cutting, I want to show you something interesting about the tool we're using here. You may have been given a cutting tool when you first purchased your lathe. More than likely it looks something like this with an angled top. This is called the rake of the tool, and if it slopes back like this, then the tool has been shaped for cutting steel. But we're cutting brass, and brass behaves differently to steel when it's machined. It has a tendency to grab the cutting tool and dig in. So to avoid this, we machine brass using these flat top tools that have what's called zero rake. We're going to start with the tool on the left for the facing cuts and then use the tool on the right for some ornamental grooves. So load the facing tool onto the lathe tool post and then set the tool onto centre height using your tailstock centre as a reference. Orient the tool to face the work and then take a facing cut like this. Now flip the rod and then do the same thing to the other end. Next, we want to drill a hole in the end of the rod so that we can insert that needle. So set up the drill chuck in the lathe tailstock. Find a drill bit that's just a tiny bit larger than the needle. It's also a good idea to always start drilling with a spotting drill like this. It's a short, stiff drill bit that starts the hole. Small drill bits in particular have a tendency to wander off course, so making an accurate starting point helps to ensure that the hole ends up where you want it to be. Once you have the hole started, put in your other drill bit and continue drilling the hole. It's quite a deep hole relative to the size of the drill bit, so you'll want to peck away at it like this and clear the chips often. Use a light touch to stop the bit from flexing and keep going until you've made the hole about a ½ inch deep. Now if you don't have a drill bit this small, you can make your own from a spare needle like this. Grind a 2-sided taper on the needle using a grinder or even an oil stone. If you're using a grinder, keep the contact with the belt short. You don't want to soften the steel with too much heat. You're aiming for something that looks like this. Now form a pointed tip on the end. Again, use very light touches to the grinder. And when you're finished, you'll end up with something like this. It's called a spear point bit, and it's a type of drill bit that's been made and used by clockmakers for hundreds of years. Now it doesn't have spiral flutes like a modern drill bit, so we need to clear the chips much more often, but it sure beats buying a specialist drill bit for just a single use. Okay, now let's set up the lathe to cut the little taper on the end of the scriber. I've found a taper of around 6 degrees looks about right, so we're going to set up to cut half of that angle. If your lathe has a movable headstock like this one, then it's going to mean doing something like this. If, however, you have a more traditional design lathe, maybe something more like this benchtop model, then you'll be loosening off the compound and moving it like this. Okay, take the cut to form the taper and keep going until it looks about right to you. The end of the cut puts you very close to the chuck, so be mindful of not running the tool into it. And then put a nice chamfer on the end to narrow it even further. The cutting tool is a little further from the chuck than we'd normally accept, so if you get a bit of chatter, just slow the lathe right down and let the tool scrape the work. With brass, you could even turn the lathe off and pull the chuck through by hand to remove any chatter marks. Next, we're going to put some ornamental grooves along the body of the scriber that'll also give it a nice grip. So reset the headstock back to the straight position and extend the work a little further from the chuck. We're now going to use the other cutting tool, which has been shaped to cut threads, and it's perfect for what we want to do here. Position the tool so that it's perpendicular to the work and make the first plunge cut. The position and spacing is entirely your choice. My lathe is metric. I'm feeding in a 0.5 millimetre and then moving the carriage along 2 millimetres before taking the next cut. To continue the pattern, extend the stock, register the tool in the last groove, and then move along to the next position to make another cut. This way the tool is cutting as close as possible to the headstock, and it should minimise any chatter. If you'd like the tool to have a bright surface finish, now is a good time to take care of this end with a buffing stick. Okay, that's one end complete. Now do something similar on the other end of the tool. And again, a little emery paper will bring up the surface finish nicely. Okay, the last step is to fix the needle in place with a drop of adhesive. And we're done. This is a great little tool, and you're going to find it useful for many purposes beyond just laying out your designs on metal. If you wear out or bend the point, no problem. Just gently heat up the tip and the adhesive will break. You can pull out the damaged one and fix in a new one. I'm Chris from ClickSpring. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next video.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our channel or send us a comment on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to check out our other project videos or visit us on makezine.com.